Okay, let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you are dialing in from. That's the beauty of our online events. It's always breakfast time somewhere around the world. So those who have started the day, welcome to our Impact for Breakfast session. By way of introduction, my name is Deborah Keller, and I lead on the Impact for Breakfast Network, which is an initiative supported by Artha Impact, the impact investing arm of the Rianta Capital Family Office based here in Zurich and in London. This specialized group has been gathering and growing since 2008, starting off in London with an expansion today to 23 cities around the globe. We just launched a new chapter in Kampala, Uganda last week, which is our first chapter in Africa. Today, we are 2,800 members strong who are meeting virtually and at in-person gatherings in the local chapters. Impact for Breakfast is an informal network of family offices, foundations, funds, venture philanthropy, and intermediary organizations with a common focus on social enterprise, entrepreneurship, and impact investing. Those who are here for the very first time and wish to learn more about the network, you're welcome to visit our website on impactforbreakfast.com. I'll share the link with you in the chat field shortly, where you can read more about us, and you can also join the network if you're interested in staying in the loop about our IFB events. We are gathering online today to learn about a unique approach and strategy of a VC fund. Angel and VC investors seek to add value to their portfolio companies as they grow. Yet, the vast majority overlook what is often the most critical component, the growth and sustainability of the people leading the business. Statistically, the problem abound. Entrepreneurs are 24% more likely to experience mental health disorders. Burnout is a top 10 reason why startups fail, and leadership is often a lonely journey. Given these realities, how do investors frequently bear such a dangerous blind spot? The Groundswell team has developed a unique strategy in support of the wellness and conscious leadership of portfolio companies' teams. The Groundswell team will share today their learnings on how their approach adds value to investing relationships, case studies for success and failures, and best practices one can implement as an investor. And now, to our wonderful speakers of today's session, I have the pleasure to introduce you to Jeremy Harkey, founder and managing director of Groundswell, and Catherine Moss, managing director of Groundswell. Before we dive into today's topic, just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. I want to inform you that this session is being recorded. As always, I'll be sharing this recording along the contact details from our speakers that you can pass along with your network, to your network or colleagues that should hear about the insights shared today. And after the presentation, we will move over to Q&A discussion round. I want to remind you that this is an informal network, so please feel free to unmute yourself and share your thoughts, comments, anything that crosses your mind. We'd love to hear it. And if you can think of a question for our speakers during the presentation, you're welcome to type it into the chat field, and we'll make sure to get up during the Q&A session. And now, with no further ado, over to you, Jeremy. Welcome.
Thanks, Deborah. Hi, everyone. It's great to join you. I am a recent member of Impact for Breakfast, and this is actually my first session, so I'm really glad to be sharing today with you all what Catherine and I are up to with Groundswell. Just before we start, as a disclaimer, I have a big screen, so if I'm shifting my eyes, it's not that I'm looking away or being distracted, it's just that I'm looking elsewhere. And it's fun to see your faces and know that you're all over the world. And if those of you who are not on video are able and willing to come on video at some point, that add to the experience, I think, for all of us. So I want to start with a story about a recent conversation I had with the CEO of one of our portfolio companies. So I was talking with Janet about how the company's been doing, their revenue growth, their plans for the next 6 months. And it was really a great conversation. And then after about 30 minutes, I asked her, and Janet, how are you doing personally? And she paused, and it was just an audio call. I heard her pause, and she said, Jeremy, I don't get asked that very often. And just this question opened a whole new angle of the conversation for us. And it took us a few levels deeper. So she shared about how her first child is going to college, how she feels about that, how that's affecting her life, and so on. And this piece of our conversation unto itself wasn't transformative, but it did help her, I think, feel seen not just as the CEO of her company, but as a person. And I think that really deepened our relationship. And now we've set that precedent for, we can go there. We can talk about the harder side of things in life and not just business. So as Groundswell, Catherine and I have identified that we think there's a fundamentally wrong approach in the venture and angel investing space as to how many investors perceive and relate with the leaders of their portfolio companies. So given this, Groundswell's developed a strategy to support our portfolio companies and their people much more deeply. So we invest in their growth as people so they can become sustainable as people and as leaders, and in turn support the sustainable growth and success of the company.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks everyone for coming in, and it's great to be here, like Jeremy said. And I'll could jump in here just to give a quick background on Groundswell, and then we'll get into the meat of the presentation. So Groundswell is a venture growth equity fund, and we invest at the intersection of climate and human wellness. And we do that because we believe that there is an inextricable link between the two. Recently I've been always catching up on the different climate related articles and headlines and things like that. And a couple have really caught my eye and articulates it quite well. And that's the climate driven health crisis. And if you think about the last decade and how it's impacted our wellness, both environmentally as well as, human and, our population, it's changed it in generation defining ways, irregular weather patterns, wildfires, global pandemics, rapid rise in chronic illnesses, and it's having significant impact on our health. And when you look at the emergency visits due to heat stroke, exacerbated asthma, heart attacks, injuries and illnesses to severe storms, it really becomes quite clear how linked they are. And one quick stat is, 71% of people that have experienced some sort of climate related event believe that climate change is real, so I think it's, very much linked, that people are recognizing, especially once you've been through it, how linked that those two things are. And so Groundswell is here to reverse those trends. We feel like there's a massive opportunity to bring smart capital to areas where there's innovation and can make impactful change while also delivering strong financial returns. And our unique advantage at Groundswell is supporting portfolio companies with these leadership and wellness initiatives. As Jeremy alluded to, and we'll dive much deeper here, but we strongly believe in providing human capital alongside our financial capital. And this leadership lens gives us access to opportunities by getting into deals, by being able to connect with founders at a different level, as Jeremy mentioned, and perform thorough diligence and mitigate the risk of our investments, of the portfolios companies that we're looking at. And it enables us to have a close relationship with the management teams. So that's just a quick overview of Groundswell. We'll dive deeper, obviously, as into the leadership and wellness initiatives, and we'll just give quick background on each of us and how we got to Groundswell. And I come to Groundswell as a founder operator. So I've started a serial entrepreneur. I've started several companies within the climate friendly consumer wellness space. Always had a passion for health and wellness, and recognized early on, how human wellness was linked to the health of our planet and vice versa. I can go into a rabbit hole of examples of how I was an athlete growing up. I played soccer and hockey in college. I was a professional soccer player afterwards, and just my experience as an athlete being able to play outdoors compared to my daughter, who is 3.5, and her first soccer practice was canceled because of smoke levels due to wildfires. So just kind of, times have changed, and I saw an opportunity to create a product that's better for you and also better for the environment. And with this insight, OWYN came to be, and that's the name of the brand. It's a climate-friendly, allergen-free nutrition brand that's become the fastest growing brand within its category in the US. And we created a product that people really need, which is a lot different than a product that people want. And it positively impacts our planet, and we quantify that. For example, in the first quarter of this year, we were able to save 223 metric tons of methane, which is equivalent to 13,000 barrels of oil consumed. So, we are really looking to drive change, not only on the health of the product itself, but also how, from a manufacturing standpoint, how it impacts the planet. And I kind of bring up OWYN and my experience building that and how that helps me at Groundswell is having launched something from nothing and built and scaled an impact-driven business. It's really allowed me to identify those other opportunities, those other founders that I want to back, and given me the skill set and know-how to, really find the deals and the companies that we want to be, part of for a long time. And when I stepped away from the day of OWYN, it was to become an investor in a more formal way. I'd been doing a lot of angel investing myself, but I wanted to drive even more change. And I felt that I could do that at the venture level by joining Groundswell and Jeremy. And here we are today. And so I'll kick it over to Jeremy, and he can give his background in the founding of Groundswell itself.
Thank you, Catherine. So I come to Groundswell with a background in international human rights and development. I worked with the UN High Commissioner for Refugees for many years in Latin America and the Caribbean. And as some changes happened in my life, I switched away from that humanitarian work and started to focus more on environmental factors. And the first step that I took into that was to perform high-level research on climate change as a driver of human displacement. And one of the things that I learned in this process is that whereas I'd previously been very public sector, nonprofit sector focused, all of a sudden I started to see the relevance of the private sector to what's important to me and the changes that I knew needed to happen and that I wanted to help generate in the world. So I founded Groundswell to do this. I love what I do, and even at what I like to think of as a still pretty young age, I think of this as sort of a capstone experience for me, bringing together a lot of what I've done until now in terms of my experience and my outlook. And as we'll share today, a key piece of this for me is my experience and training as a leadership and executive coach. So, Catherine, would you just talk us through the agenda, please? And I'll share that screen.
Muted, Catherine.
Catherine, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. The agenda. So this is kind of a little quick outline of what we're going over today. The problem opportunity to bring human capital to investing. We recognize as investors how we could support the people behind the companies we back, not just the company themselves, and identify and offer resources to support our portfolio companies. And as most investors say, founders are kind of the key ingredient to the startup success, but few actually invest in their growth potential. And that's what we're here at Groundswell to do, and realize that there's a real need for companies to have that level of support, that partnership, along with funding to invest in these leadership and wellness initiatives and into the kind of what people consider the softer side of the company, so that we can help support the growth of the people as leaders, as company builders, supporting the team and its culture. We'll give some examples in practice and what we've learned and how we've evolved our positioning as this type of VC fund. And then at the end, we'll just give kind of a summary of recommendations for all of you as investors yourselves, and how you can implement some of these strategies within your own due diligence.
Thanks, Catherine. So What's the problem that we're seeking to address? We all recognize that company leaders and their teams are key to the success of a company, and particularly startup and venture-backed companies. Yet, at the same time, there are many factors that are stacked against the ability of leaders and their teams to perform well. And we think of this as three different levels. The first is structural, the second is individual, and the third is related to financing. So I'll start first with the structural problems. There is a disproportionately high degree of mental health disorders among the entrepreneurial community, and this includes, among others, anxiety, depression, and substance abuse. 3 of the top 10 reasons that startups fail relate to people and their teams. Burnout is a reality. We've particularly seen this in the context of COVID and increase in remote work. And burnout results in underperformance, and it can result in key personnel leaving the teams. And then finally, leadership related. Founders don't always have the right experience and training and awareness to be the leaders of larger, more mature companies. In many cases, they'll start and they have what it needs at the beginning. And then as the company grows, they just don't have naturally what it takes to scale with the company as a leader. So the second level is the individual experience level. Leadership is lonely. It's a big thing. And wellness is holistic. And wellness, quite frankly, affects our ability, all of our ability, and the ability of startup founders to work effectively and to be sustainable as people. And in this, we think of various factors as being in play. And these are naturally challenged by the high pressure entrepreneurial context. So the first factor is physical health and wellness. Second is mental wellness. And a third that's pretty prevalent is work-life balance and the time to do and to spend time with the people that nourish you and that make you whole as a human. So structural, individual level, and then financing problems associated with these two levels. When companies raise, generally they know exactly what they're going to spend their $5, $10, $15 million on. And from what we've seen, to the extent that they're spending on their teams, it's generally for hiring or for changes in compensation, but not for the softer side of the leadership and human resources element of the company. For example, investing in coaching, investing in wellness initiatives, improving team dynamics or the culture. And so as a result of this, the companies, even after perhaps being well-funded in a recent investment round, are under-resourced to support the wellness, the leadership growth, and the team dynamics of their companies. And generally what we've seen is that there's little orientation towards proactively addressing these problems. So in summary around these problems, these are all risks to the sustainability of individuals and the teams, and in turn, risk to the company performance and to the company and the team's ability to being able to react nimbly to challenges that emerge, whether in the company or the team or external factors that affect the company.
Thank you. Yeah. So what, why is this important for us as angel investors, as VC investors? As Jeremy kind of summarized there, what could happen as a result to leadership and to a company? And the risks there are the inefficiencies in leadership and management, and although on one side of the spectrum, which could result in replacing a CEO, which changes culture, changes dynamics, is a big, long hiring process, is expensive, all the way to actually the company failing if some of those things aren't done in early enough in the life cycle. And so the opportunities that we see are companies who are aware of this and get ahead of it and will not be disrupted by it. And, from a personal experience, having raised venture capital and raised private equity money before, I would have loved if an investor came to me with this offering. We've had some great investors, we've had some not so great investors, and ones that claimed it could be value add. And none of them necessarily showed up and cared about my personal growth and leadership development. So I'm really excited to be kind of on that other side with Groundswell, being able to engage with these founders and executive team on a much deeper level. And so, investors who think this way are unique and exceptional, we think. And, if leveraged the right way, we can be a deeper value add investor. And it benefits us too, as we are able to, one, get into competitive deals. I think founders are really appreciating this kind of empathy and human aspect to investing that they haven't experienced before. It helps really mitigate our risk, as mentioned before, and it helps companies optimize their performance. And so we're really excited to kind of be doing this.
Thanks, Catherine. So wanted to share a little bit about what we've done, how we recognize these challenges among our portfolio companies, as well as in the broader entrepreneurial community, and how we've incorporated a response to these problems into our investing strategy. So we'll talk about this in terms of our development of the strategy, as well as lessons learned in two phases. First, and simply just to break it down into Fund 1 and Fund 2 for timing purposes. So with Groundswell's first fund in 2019, we saw a need and an opportunity among our portfolio companies for leadership coaching specifically, both at the individual as well as at the kind of shared experienced co-founder level, given challenges between the co-founders. And we saw that the portfolio companies didn't have or didn't want to prioritize a budget for this coaching. And coaching isn't cheap in the United States. Good coaches can be quite expensive, actually. But it's in the broader scheme of things, it really wouldn't mean that much of a budget for them. But in any case, they weren't prioritizing budget for this. So we as Groundswell came up with a mechanism to offer additional investment capital so that they had an earmarked budget for coaching and for other critical needs. And as we were developing the strategy, we saw that there wasn't really much of a playbook for this. There are other funds who use this similar strategy or variations on this, and we spoke with some of those funds. We spoke with folks in our network who are coaches, therapists, other investors, but there was not kind of a tried and true playbook. So we, as we were going, we in fact were kind of creating our own strategy. So what we did was we offered an earmarked budget on top of our investment capital for them to have a leadership and wellness bucket. And we purposefully framed this broad, recognizing that wellness encompasses leadership, team dynamics, culture, physical, mental, work-life balance, all these factors that go into wellness. And with each of the companies that we offered this to, we did initially a cursory review of the problems that they were experiencing, but we didn't dig too deeply. And in essence, we trusted them to know what to spend this capital on and how to use it to address problems they were experiencing. So as we framed this offering, it was a pretty simple introduction to it. We shared the philosophy on why we wanted to offer this and why we thought it was important. We offered the budget. At that time, it was a pretty modest $25,000, but they could do a lot with that. And we offered connection to coaches and other consultants and service providers who we trusted and knew, and who were offering a subsidized rate to our portfolio companies. And this offering was received really well. We had an enthusiastic response. People really had not heard of this coming from other investors. So of the 5 companies in our portfolio that we offered it to, 5 of these companies accepted the earmarked capital with this kind of framing of what it would be for. So I'm going to share a little bit about how these companies put it to use. So 4 of the 5 initially within the first year did put the capital to use. One example of how it was put to use, kind of a success story, is the CEO was under stress and she was having really significant work-life balance challenges. Right away, she put the capital towards working with a coach, and this was transformative for her. On the other side of things, there was a company that was growing at a pretty high pace. This was the COVID context, and they were benefiting from that context. Half of their team was new, and it was a pretty stressful environment. What the CEO chose to do with this earmarked capital is to buy a nice coffee machine and to have a budget for team lunches. This, in spite of the fact that the CEO knew and the team knew and we knew there were deeper, more significant problems happening. So in summary, given these two cases, we give the companies the budget and discretion over spending it because we didn't want to be prescriptive and we didn't want to tell them how to spend it. And the companies applied it in a range of ways. Some were immediate and direct to address the problem. Some were delayed and responsive to problems that emerged. And others were kind of a Band-Aid solution and really missing the deeper mark of the problem. One of the companies in the first portfolio did not initially use that capital as they had indicated they wanted to, and as we hoped they would, in spite of the fact that they were having really significant communication problems between co-founders. And this resulted in decision-making problems and challenges. And over the years, instead of having invested in themselves, the problems got worse. And there was a degradation of the co-founder relationship. There were challenges with the board and the leadership style. Now we can see really, in fact, all undermined the company's growth. So that's the first fund, our first kind of learning space, some of the challenges and lessons learned successes that happen with it. With Fund 2 that Catherine and I are working with now, which we launched this year, we recognized that there really was a great opportunity and that we could apply the lessons that we learned from the first fund in designing a new strategy. So we saw that still very few investors were thinking this way and that this was a great opportunity to support companies. And as Catherine mentioned, to stand out in the market and add real value as well as access competitive funding rounds. We recognize that the kind of laissez-faire, give a budget and leave it approach generally was not working because it missed opportunities. And in many cases, those could undermine the company. And we recognize that this work is critical and that not having a budget and an orientation to addressing these problems can be, in fact, crippling for the team and can cause real setbacks. So given these problems, we saw a real opportunity to, in fact, stand strong in this offering, in this approach to how we can partner with companies as funders. So we, in fact, integrated it integrally into our branding, into our ethos. And from the beginning of our conversations with companies that we're speaking with and performing due diligence with, we tell them that we care about them as people and as leaders, and that we want to relate with them and to support them as such. Catherine's experience as an entrepreneur, mine as a coach, and ours collectively as investors really allows us to say to the founders of the companies we're speaking with that we get it, we see you, we want to help you address these key factors for your success as a person and your sustainability in service to the company's success and sustainability. So quickly, I'll share my screen. The way this works in practice is that there are two key elements, and half of it, the first two of these three kind of bullets here, is a hands-on approach, and the other remains the funding approach. So within the hands-on approach, there are two elements. One is that I manage a leadership 360 with the individual senior leaders, and then kind of bring these leadership 360s up into a collective 360 so that the team as a whole can understand how they are as leaders collectively and how they might want to make adjustments as a team. So the 360 is a tool that measures leadership qualities that this tool has correlated with leadership effectiveness and positive business results. And the way we work with this is that we manage the 360 administration, and I myself facilitate the debrief, and in that process go through what's working well as what they can change to be more effective as leaders. And then if they want to go further in, if they want to do kind of deeper, longer term work around their leadership strengthening and related topics, they then work with another coach, aside from myself. And what this results in is an awareness of how they're experienced as a leader. And it opens up tremendous insight for them into how the team experiences them. It really kind of sets aside a lot of the communication blocks that can happen just naturally due to hierarchy, due to team dynamics. And it helps them look inward at how they can grow further as a leader and a person. This also results in, back to my story about Janet, richness in our relationship, because we have that mutual understanding of them, the CEO, as a person and as a leader. And we understand the growth that they're experiencing and that they're grappling with. So when we have check-in calls, the calls aren't just about kind of the business fundamentals, but they can be honest, direct, and vulnerable conversations about how they're doing and how we're doing, and really kind of have that person-to-person connection experience. So the second piece is a temperament assessment tool. This tool that we use is called Real Colors. It's in the Myers-Briggs family. And what it does is assesses our natural operating system. So temperament is our natural operating system outside of a context, whereas personality is our temperament in a context. So what the tool does is it helps us understand how we're naturally inclined to think and communicate and organize. And we do this with the whole team. So not just the senior leadership, but the whole team of the company across levels and verticals. And what this does is it results in people really learning about themselves and how their temperament is organized and how this manifests daily for them. For example, how much information do they need in order to make a decision? Are they wordy or are they direct in their communication? How do emotions play into how they relate with people? So they learn this about themselves and about their teammates across levels. And then participants share what they've learned about themselves so the team can integrate this insight into how they communicate and work together going forward. And then the third factor is the funding. And we still offer earmarked funding in exchange for equity at the price of the round. So this is a tack on to our more kind of substantive investment in the round so that the company has a budget for wellness, leadership, and team dynamics. And having learned what we did with the first fund, in order to support their spending it appropriately in a proactive manner, we start by doing kind of an organizational review. So we look across the organization to identify leadership, team dynamics, and wellness problems, as well as what's going well that they can dig further into and embrace further. And then we share our findings with them and make recommendations based on their current needs, what they're experiencing now, or needs that we and they can project may come down the road. For example, when their teams doubled in 6 months and now they have team members in 9 countries instead of just 3, for example. And then we make introductions to a short list of trusted consultants and coaches and they can choose with whom they work. If they're already working with coaches, they can continue with that, or they can work with our kind of group. And then going forward, we check in with them regularly and we do periodic pulse checks to understand how these factors are continuing. Are the problems improving? Are they changing? How that's going? So really, it's much deeper and it's a longer term partnership where we're not afraid to kind of step in with them and understand what's going on, because we really want them to be able to address the problems proactively and effectively. And what we found that this results in is a deeper relationship of trust and transparency. The company gets ahead of potential problems. The leaders are more effective and the teams are more sustainable, and they're prepared to weather challenges that might come along down the road. So I'll share one one last example. Let's see. Sorry, that's not good. One last example of a success story. So the CEO, this is not him, but we'll call him George. We started with a leadership 360. George was a typical entrepreneur. He'd worked in other fields, but not really with leadership responsibilities. He had a great idea. He dove right in to start the company, but he never had the experience leading a team of 10 or 12 people. So we started with the leadership 360. That opened up a lot of insight for him. One of the results for him was that he, for the first time in his life, decided to work with a therapist on a regular basis, and he's still doing that. He decided that he needed to integrate exercise into his daily schedule and recognize that this is something that would allow him to show up better at work. So he blocks a certain time in his day to go out and exercise, and he supports this for the team as well. And then he pursued 360s for the middle level management and did debriefs with them to understand their challenges as well as their strengths and how they're interrelated with him as the senior leader. And then it's resulted in changes in the communication structure across the team. So just starting with this leadership 360 really opened up a whole lot for George immediately, as well as longer term, individually, and for the broader team.
Thanks. So I'll just kind of sum it up here in terms of best practices and how you guys can incorporate many of these things, the wellness and team dynamics into the diligence process. So beginning in the diligence process, asking questions to show your interest and care about them, as humans. Obviously you want to make sure that the business checks all the boxes, but I think being able to relate to someone as you're, going into a real long time partnership with them, showing them that you care is really important. So you can identify potential leadership and team related risks by doing that. You can look to understand how they think about these needs and if and how a budget for them might make sense. To show interest in your check-in calls. So same thing, after you've made the investment and you're doing ongoing check-ins and quarterly updates, incorporate these types of conversations and open-ended questions of, how are you doing personally? How have you been experiencing this change? How has this recent challenge affected the team's morale? Getting kind of providing thought-provoking questions that really kind of allows for a deeper, more meaningful conversation. I think we kind of mentioned it earlier, but, having been a founder, starting with, it was me and, one other person founding team, to adding your first team member, to then having 5 people and 25 and 50, each one of those, team growths changes the dynamics in the culture significantly. And as a leader, there's a lot of different roles and responsibilities, a lot of things you have to let go and control. So, having that check-in with them is very, very meaningful. You can offer earmarked budget if that's something that you guys are able to do, or encourage them to do. Be supportive of them, in a capital raise, setting aside a portion of their budget for these wellness initiatives, knowing that, yes, it's going to help them personally, it's going to help the team, but ultimately it's really going to help the business too. And partner with a service provider that can help support these companies' needs if that makes sense. So hopefully this was helpful, and we're here to answer any questions that you guys might have, and love to just keep the conversation going.
Thank you very much, Jeremy and Catherine, for this insightful presentation. What crossed my mind while you both were speaking is, especially with your second fund, that there's a win-win situation for both ends. As you communicate your interest in the wellness of the entrepreneurs, you'll be automatically also attracting those businesses that have an open ear for those issues. And I could imagine that there is less resistance in speaking about that topic and speaking about these problems when they're coming up, as with people that are not very much open to that topic. Because I guess, in business, it's always, people see it as two different things, their private lives and the business life. But if we're honest, this is exactly the same. We're just one person. And having that open ear and going to entrepreneurs and businesses with those values, that it is important, creates already common ground for these discussions and for openness. One question regarding working with those entrepreneurs. We see it. We have the same issues coming across here and there, as we also have a portfolio in India doing early stage impact investing in various sectors. We always get to one point where the founders maybe should take over another role and not be the CEO. How do you convince them to take a different role? And because it's very difficult, and they build that company, and then you come and say, listen, I think you should take a different role. That's it can be seen as an offense also, but how do you make that positive, and how do you convince them to take up a different role that also has a lot of meaning and brings a lot of value to the company?
Well, I want to ask Catherine her thoughts, and I just want to offer a quick framing initially. My father-in-law is in venture capital, and I've learned a lot from him. And he shared that one question that he asks every CEO in which he might invest is, if the time comes, are you willing to step aside as CEO and let someone else step in? And initially, I still don't ask it in quite that way, because it seems very kind of abrupt to me. But it's an absolutely critical question to understand their outlook on that. And this goes back to what you're saying of how they think about, as we share about our approach, we can learn from them in terms of how they're thinking about their own leadership and personal wellness strengthening. So absolutely, I think that's a critical problem. Catherine, what do you think about how to kind of broach this need and bring it into a strategy with the company?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's a very sensitive topic, discussion, action that needs to be addressed in the right way. I think, if you think about just in normal conversation, if you go and tell someone what to do, like, go do that, they're going to be like, no, I'm going to go do this. And so I think it's leading them to the decision you want them to make, or what you want to have happen, the outcome. And so I think by doing these different exercises, by doing leadership 360s, or, doing these other efforts that bring feedback from a collective group of people above them, below them, that all sort of, not all say you need to leave, but all sort of suggest that maybe you're not the right fit, or maybe your skills are better doing XYZ, and it's going to help the company in ABC way, even further, finding a role that you're not just totally giving them the boot, but, making them realize that they are valuable, they were the founders, and now, to get it to the next level, they need to take a different role. And I think it's just kind of you need to have a soft, dialogue. And I don't think it's a one conversation and you're out, you're doing something different. I think it needs to be a process that includes, again, people above and below, that sort of providing feedback as to where, then that founder's best use of time would be for the company.
I think there's also a thing of helping them identify what they enjoy most and where they're most effective. And sometimes that's not as CEO, and maybe they enjoy the sales process the most, but that's only a quarter of what they're able to do now, or they're not able to do it now as CEO. So kind of talking through with them, if they could define their dream role for the next 5 years with the company, what might that look like? That could be a good kind of prompt.
Thank you. As Angelica, I saw you were raising your hand. I'm not sure if your question was already answered. Maybe Maud, in the meantime, please go ahead with your question.
Yes, I really want to thank you for a very clear and inspiring sharing. of your experiences, and just rejoices me to see that not only have you managed to find interest in the companies that you invest in, but it's also bringing fruits. And I was curious about maybe the more collective and the cultural dimension of the work that you do, because of course you had to choose examples and maybe you didn't touch upon that. We know that leaders, through how they show up in every moment, they literally shape the culture, and it happens at a collective level. And when you think about business efficiency, those dynamics can go really far in terms of impacting the brand, impacting even the impact that every employee is able to make through that cultural ramification. So I was curious if you would be okay to share maybe a story or a few examples of how you tackle collective dynamics as well as culture in your interventions.
Great question. Thank you. Catherine, would you like to take this on?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think, in Jeremy's last example with the CEO, how he is encouraging, employees to take time to work out themselves. I think it's, and the other example where the CEO bought a coffee machine, although not what we intend for the money to be used on, but I think supporting leaders in taking time to promote team activities, business aside. One of our portfolio companies is doing a retreat in Colorado. They're based kind of all over the world, but they're bringing everyone offsite to Colorado to do some leadership and coaching development work, but also just to have fun and be a group as people, as friends, as colleagues. So I think it's just encouraging more time, not just head down, nose deep in the computer. So I think it's really kind of being able to have the team come together and sharing those life experiences, similar to us as investors coming to them, trying to learn more about them personally. We want to encourage those same conversation within the team.
Thank you, Catherine.
I'm not sure if that totally addressed your question or not, but
I guess I was looking for things that go way deeper than a coffee machine or even a team building. Really talking about, things like on an everyday basis, what decisions do you make with scarce resources, and what signal does it send about what's really valued in this company in terms of, what principles, or how do we want to show up, and how does it link to the purpose, in our actions. So yeah, that's a good start. Thank you.
Yeah, I think just we're firm believers in the importance of identifying one's individual and collective values and integrating those across business structures and systems, including decision-making processes like you're referencing. So we firmly believe and recommend to companies that they identify what their real values are, not kind of aspirational, not what they think they should be, but what they are, and integrate those across the way they do business and they make decisions and how their team operates and coordinates. So I think that's an example of how that can be integrated.
Thanks a lot.
Suzanne, I think you're up next. Please go ahead.
Thank you, and thanks Jeremy and Catherine for sharing this topic. And I have two questions, and I think the first one, I just want to clarify how exactly you structured this funding, this wellness funding, if you like. From what I'm hearing, just to confirm, is that's sort of additional to your invested capital, but also as equity, I guess, just to confirm that. And I think another question is, when, of course, you're offering this package to your company, and I wonder what other investors at the same round, how they react to this package, and if any other investor also want to chip in for this funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Great question. So, first, in terms of structuring the funding, it's a cherry on top. It's an additional layer. So say we'll invest $500,000, we'll add, and that's our investment, we'll add $50,000 to that with this earmark. And Generally, we don't write out an agreement for how this can be applied, or what the understanding for the use of this capital is. Some investors do that, and perhaps in some of the situations with the Fund 1 companies, we should have done that, but we don't at the moment generally do that. So then that $50,000 is just, we get that $50,000 worth of equity in exchange for this funding. And then how other investors react, generally quite supportive. Other investors add significant value themselves, and it tends to be connections, finance related, typical value add supportive investor contributions, and that's very important. And very few of them have this type of support within their quiver, I guess. So they see a lot of value. One of our kind of points of mission as a fund is to help generate this transformation in the startup investing world. So we share quite openly with other investors about our strategy, and we encourage them to incorporate their strategy with their other portfolio companies, to ask us questions, to partner with us or whatnot. So there's generally quite a lot of openness.
Yeah, and I was just, add on to that, saying that because there's been a lot of awareness around the mental health and burnout culture and things that, actually really COVID has exposed, I think, in a good way, bringing, this conversation to light, is that other VC funds that we're investing alongside sort of welcome us in as a partner, because they see the value that we're providing, and they don't necessarily have the skill set to do it themselves, or the time to dedicate to this. And so it's very helpful in terms of kind of getting into deals as well, on that side.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Genevieve.
Hi, thank you so much for that presentation. It was really interesting. I just wanted to ask how you support your BIPOC-led companies and your BIPOC entrepreneurs, given that people from marginalized backgrounds face additional pressures, particularly around mental health, when they're trying to, with their startups and with their companies. We work a lot with marginalized groups in the USA, so I'm just keen to hear if you've got any experiences you might be able to share around that.
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in here first. I would say that, one thing that we didn't kind of touch on is that we do have a positive screen for female founders and diverse teams. And so, historically speaking, over 50% of our investments have been in, diverse executive and founding teams, and we want that to continue. So first and foremost, I'd say, we look for those types of companies and leaders. I wouldn't say that we do anything different for them, but I think by providing and having an eye out for ways that we can, fund these types of leaders, and then offering the support, provides that layer of, extra support that they might need. Jeremy, I don't know if you have more to add with your experience.
No, I think that's right. I think just, we're aware of the different experiences that can play into both the background of our founders, as well as the resources they have access to. So we bring in additional awareness to these factors and openness to how they may come up in our conversations with the founders. And certainly one example is within our kind of group of trusted coaches and consultants. They're not all white men. They're not all white females. So we certainly, they have the opportunity to work with whomever they like. And we like to offer diversity of background, as well as cultural, ethnic, racial background of the folks who we recommend as potential service providers.
Thanks so much.
We got one more minute, I see. We have one question from James in the chat box. He's asking if a company is interested in partnering with Groundswell to support the personal growth of its core leadership team, what practical steps should be taken?
Thanks, James. Be happy to have you reach out to us to share the situation of the team you're referring to, and can talk through the strategy that we use and make recommendations to service providers and other support that we work with.
Thank you, Jeremy. One last question. Maybe you could give us, if we fast forward 5, 6, 7 years, where would you like to see Groundswell as a VC fund and as an organization?
Catherine?
All right. I mean, I think we want to be seen as the kind of the thought leader in the space that brings this leadership and wellness offering to venture. You know, we want to kind of help change the conversation around, you know, when people raise venture, they're like, oh, yeah, good luck. You know, we want people to think about venture as a partnership in a meaningful, holistic way. And if we can be seen as that, I think we'll be quite successful as an actual investors, you know, on the financial side and driving returns, being able to raise money, and really having an impact, you know, not only within the investment areas that we're investing in, but the teams and the leaders and the people that we're backing.
Thank you very much, Catherine.
And Deborah, I see a bonus question from Maud.
Yes.
Can you address that?
Yes, she's asking what you're doing for yourself to make sure you're also taking care of yourself, doing running the organization you're running.
Yeah, it absolutely. Catherine and I, not just in name, but in practice, place a lot of importance on walking our talk. Friday's my birthday. I'm taking the day off to do a trail run, going from my traditional 9 miles up to 15 miles. And so that's an example of just integrating into my life what's important to me. I receive coaching. I have other forms of support personally that keep me going and keep me growing as a person. And Catherine and I also bring that into our team.
Yeah,
That's
similarly, I would
beautiful.
say, yeah, I have a coach. I'm going to be going through the 360 leadership assessments. I've done the real colors, so we've done it all. And I think, you know, in terms of daily things, it's in working out, you know, making sure I get exercise and also spending time with my kids, the people that kind of fill my cup on the other side.
Thank you very much for these personal insights. And thank you very much for this insightful presentation and sharing this holistic approach with us. As I said, I'll be sharing this recording with you all. Please share it with every single fund you know, because I think that's an amazing approach. They can all learn from this kind of strategy in supporting entrepreneurs. I'll be also sharing our speakers' contact details, which you're welcome to share as well with your network. Thank you all very much for joining today's session and being part of IFB. For those who are not part of IFB, you're welcome to join us. And I look forward to seeing you all at another Impact for Breakfast session. And I wish you all a wonderful day ahead for those who are just starting, and a nice evening for those who are ending. Take care and look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank
Bye.
you so much.
Everybody.
Be well.
Bye.